It's, I think that was actually a beautifully put thing at some point to me was, if you've got an idea, there's a concept that you want to deliver, if you can't deliver that without having specific things in place, then it puts into question your ability as an artist, which I didn't see it necessarily like that, but there is a specific thing of like specialism versus ad hocism.
Yeah.
I'm definitely an ad hoc artist.
100%.
If I've got boundaries, I'll find a way to navigate them, you know? And if you have to be like, well, I can't do this because I don't have the right paint, then it's like, well...
Yeah, and I think that as well, like even, you know, just discussing working classness, I guess that is like sort of inherent within me, is that, you know, like, I mean, I got rejected for something this morning, but I'm like, I'm still going to keep going. I'm still just going to make it. And like, I'm making this film literally like with my iPhone and whatever, do you know, and it's just like about, like, I don't have a fancy recorder. I don't even have, I've got iMovie on my phone. And that's how I'm navigating the world, because I can't, you know, the art world, because I can't afford to buy a camera or, you know, like, but pay for Photoshop or whatever like that. So I guess like that is just like straight away us into the chat of like, well, I just work with what I've got. And I think that's why I am so interested in ceramics, I think, because I kind of like grew up in this house where I used to go to my grand's quite a lot because my mum was out working. She was working 2 jobs basically to kind of keep us going. And, you know, I used to go to my granny's every day after school, and it was very much typical Scottish sort of working class childhood, you know, like soup and mince and tatties and
mince and tatties, boy.
And what do you call them? What do you call those little things? Beef olives was a big one. Don't know if you're familiar. I don't know if that's a Glasgow thing. Is that just a Scottish?
Well, I definitely had beef olives up north, but it wasn't a staple, but they were delicious.
Yeah, they really are. And I think like just growing up surrounded by like my gran very much kind of had her collections of things on display. Like she collected thimbles and she collected plates. So everywhere we went, she would have that. You know, we'd pick her one up, and even still to this day, like when I go places, I'm like, ooh, you know, that urge to pick something up is there. So I guess that's why I'm interested in working class ceramics, and also kind of reading or sort of the relationship between the working class and ceramics, because there are also working class ceramics, which there's quite a lot of like motto ware, which kind of has a lot of like Scottish sayings and stuff on it, which is super interesting if you get into looking at that. But also, I guess just because like that was what I saw growing up, was ceramics and collections of things, and so then it kind of sort of was natural that I would grow up and then be like, oh, I want to like make things and have things, and you know, I'm very tactile with my work, and everything is like very hands-on, apart from filming. Even with filming, like I've been filming myself touching my ceramics and things like that recently, so I think that's where it kind of all stems from.
It's a beautiful phenomenon. I think it's quite apparent within working class culture, whereas you do have the things like the bric-a-brac, the collectibles, those sort of things, and that's a special treat. But apart from that, you also have the material culture of beautiful things, or things that are perceived as beautiful from the viewer, which have a use. And it's that, I think that stems from this idea that in order to have any value, it has to be useful, you know, and like in the same way that even living in my van right now, my tea towel is a gift from another artist, and it's a limited edition print tea towel that they made for me, and my towel is a limited edition tea towel that was made by another artist, and these are special, beautiful things, but they all have a purpose and a use within the environment of the home, because I don't have space for it.
I know, but I think that was what the interesting thing was as well, because she kind of had like both. So she had these, as I say, I mean, obviously this is recording, but I'll show you these photos and then you can share them. But you know, you can see very much like, you know, she had these plates that were for display, and the thimbles there that were very much like not to be touched. But she also did have, like you can see in the background here, she had all these shelves with knickknacks and ceramic bits and bobs on it, and they were, you know, she had them, like there was plates and stuff in there, but they were fine to come out like good china, the kind of good china, you know, so like when people were coming over, those plates would get dished out. So there was that sort of like dynamic of things she had that were like, she had elevated to special status, and also things that were for everyday use. And I think again, and I think that's why I mean, I literally got into ceramics just by chance, because I went on exchange and they had a slip casting class, and I was like, oh, I want to try that, and did it and loved it. And then that's just how I'm now doing ceramics. Like I don't know that I would have necessarily got into otherwise, so it was pure chance. But I think having grown up around all of that, and having grown up around these objects, which as you say are useful, I think that's the thing I like about ceramics, is that they're decorative but also useful. You can make a beautiful mug, but you can also drink from it. And I think like that's, and I think also that's just a way of thinking that comes from, I guess comes maybe from being working class, is that like, you know, everything, as you say, kind of like needs to also be useful.
Yeah.
Great to be beautiful, but also useful.
Also creates beauty in these perfectly mundane moments,
Yeah.
where things like where if you're drinking your coffee from an IKEA mug, it isn't as beautiful as when you're drinking it from a mug that has been given to you from a gift shop that somebody picked up to you and brought back, or something like that. Or even if you won that mug in a raffle, there's something sort of, there's always a story attached to the beautiful things.
Yeah.
And that's why these kind of the phenomena of the useful beauty of the material culture is like a really, it's a cool thing, I think. I find it to be very interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
So like the act of like the beautiful things we can touch in the banal moments, I feel like it also feeds into this idea that of exclusion from spaces where, well, you know, like, I hate to bring up Trotsky in a working class show, but like Trotsky always had that thing of saying that art galleries were prisons for art, and be able to be kind of release the art form in a way that people can take home and use and touch and become intimate with it in whatever way, even in banal settings. It opens it up and creates an accessible dialogue with folk who feel excluded from places like the White Cube or a gallery context, where they don't feel that art is maybe necessarily for them. And that audience is now allowed to own that art in some sort of form, whether it's like the gift shop is a brilliant place.
Oh, the gift shops. Probably my favourite thing about going to anywhere is the gift shop. I'm more interested in the gift shop most times than the art. I'm like, art, nice, gift shop, great. I can buy a mug with the art on it. Because I love mugs. I'm a mug collector. Like, I've really, because my mum always says to me, your granny's not dead as long as you're alive, because I'm like my gran, you know, embodied. I think just because I spent so much time with her in childhood that like everything is rubbed off, you know, and I'm like always up twitching the curtains, seeing what's going on outside, you know, and I'm on the phone to mum going, there's someone out in the close and they're shouting, and she's like, oh, for goodness sake, like, what business is it of yours? She's like, you're just like your gran. But I forgot what I was saying that now, but I forgot what we're talking about now, but
working class art is what we're talking about.
But
that is a thing now, like a lot of the artists I've spoken to have such a strong feeling of nostalgia attached to their working class experience, and it's even though it's still an experience that we're experiencing, but we find the beautiful moments are in our childhoods and throughout our families. And I think that is because when we transitioned into the art world, we're quite alienated away from our working class experience. And by having that kind of that nostalgic memory that's attached to it and holding that connection of that's where my roots are, and celebrating those bits. That's why we always kind of keep on harking back to the sweeties we ate growing up, and that's why sweetie wrappers have become such a really important part of this, of the iconography of this show. Ice poles, Tesco bags, and things that we associate with that link that we have, that we're feeling is getting more and more tenuous the more we go into the art world. 100%.
And I think that's why I've kind of struggled a lot in the art world, is that I find I'm very like, you know, what you see is what you get, and I've been brought up in a certain way, and then once I got to art school, that was kind of all undone, unpicked, or that was like, it wasn't it's becoming more popular. I don't know, it's more popular to wear those poppered joggies that I used to wear and think, oh my god, what the hell. And now people are wearing them for fashion, and I'm like, my fashion when I was a kid was awful. Like, you can't be wearing these and thinking they're good now, surely.
I know.
Although I would probably own a pair now, I think. But yeah, so even like a lot of what you're saying, like, you know, and like I find it hard, my work does constantly hark back to, and that's what's difficult about my work, it harks back to personal memories that if you are not working class, you might not necessarily, like if you're working class, you might look at my work and go, you could maybe get where I'm coming from. But a lot of people don't necessarily always understand, or I mean, it's hard to understand my work because I say it is very personal. Like, it literally is contained in these photographs, it's contained in my head, so it's sometimes difficult to reiterate that in a sort of cohesive way, because I'm just like, well, how can you not know? But it's in my brain, so of course you can't know. But I think, you know, I do hark back a lot to particularly this home, my grandmother, you know, this period of my life as something that not only is good times but also presents issues, you know, like there's that duality there. But Yeah, I think, and I say when I got to art school, I found it very difficult because as well, you know, I'm not like a very white cube kind of person. Like, I don't really like putting my work on plinths. Like, I like to put my work on the floor or just like sitting it on a shelf because like my granny had shelves. Like that's where her artwork was on just like shelves above the radiator. So like I find it difficult to really fancify my work and really make it like, you know, like, and I think as well, like my friends are always going on to me about I've got a separate ceramics thing that I do, like selling ceramics, and I always use really creased bed sheets as my backgrounds, and my friends are always like, you need to stop doing that, and I'm like, but that's just me. I'm just a very kind of like, I'm a creased person, you know, like that's just who I am. Like, I mean, my granny would never have creased sheets, but like, you know, that's just like, I don't feel the need to it's put my work on a pedestal that I don't think it needs to sit on.
And there's a relatability about that.
Yeah.
Because for me, if I was to see a ceramic on a creased bed sheet, I can then envisage my own creased bed sheets there. That's relatable. Who is still ironing the bed sheets except for grannies?
Exactly,
like no one is doing that.
The creases come out when you sleep on them. It's fine.
Pretty much, and I'm pretty sure that ironing was invented to stop women from actually achieving things.
Yes.
It's a stupid thing. It does not need to exist.
No.
My mum would kill me if she heard me saying that.
I know, because my mum loves ironing, and I'm like, but do you, or are you just conditioned to love ironing? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I really don't understand this whole, and it genuinely takes up a lot of time. It's completely useless, and the clothes will get creased in 2 minutes.
Exactly, I know.
I think for my mum, her idea of ironing was attempting to prevent people from seeing how poor we are.
Yeah.
Because if you went into school with your creased clothes in, folk knew that you had a working parent, or both parents were working.
Yeah.
There was definitely a class issue if you had creased or dirty clothes.
Yeah, 100%.
Which my children always go to school with creased clothes, and if that conversation was to come up, it would be like, do you want to do that ironing for me? I've got other stuff I need to get done.
Yeah, completely. But I think since certainly like we would have been at school or we were growing up, I think I mean, I don't proclaim to know anything about class. Like, I think for a long time I struggled even to call myself working class because I went to university. I didn't believe I was working class because my parents didn't go to university, but I was the first person in my family to go. So I was like, well, I can't be working class then because I've gone to university. But, you know, I've kind of come to understand the nuances of how I can be better off than my parents in ways, but also still not be better off than most people.
I think that's a very important point to really explore there, is that because working class definitions, majority, and still are majority are mostly discuss how working class people have not got a higher education. However, because of the political climate when we were at primary school, high school, where for example the Scottish government started creating free higher education for people through student loans and through SAS, it became suddenly accessible to such a larger group of people. So you could fulfill the majority of the criteria for being working class, but the one thing, like for me, that's how it works. It's come up a few times actually, that somebody had said to me recently from my own family, you're self-proclaimed working class. And that was from my own family, and we are working class. We are. This is the only difference being that I did get a higher education. I got a master's, and for some reason that means that suddenly I'm no longer working class, despite having been dependent on food banks, despite being a teenage mum living in a council house in a scheme in the northeast. Like all the other signifiers, having extremely low income. That's a big one in there. In there. Despite all of that, they still were like, you're self-proclaimed because you went to uni. It's like, well, that was different because the definition hasn't changed since prior to the opening up of higher education to people who previously wasn't accessible to. So
and I mean, it was completely like when I was leaving high school, certainly, you know, if you weren't going to college or uni, then it was kind of like, and I mean, I come from a very working class place, you know, like it was not like I didn't go to private school or anything like that, but it definitely like those opportunities were just like opened up to us, but it felt like, you know, it was natural that was the progression that we would take. But I'd say I did struggle for quite a long time, and it's only really been in the last year or two that I've been like, I actually can own this, you know, like, and thinking that, I don't know, just having almost like a guilt of wanting to, you know, like call myself working class. But you know, when I speak to my parents about it, and my dad's very much like, we are working class people. He's like, we're working class people who, you know, we're doing good now because we've worked, but it's because, you know, my grandparents worked, or, you know, your great grandparents worked. I've been working all my life, you know, so I can give you things so that you can go and pursue going to art school or whatever. Especially I think going to art school was a big one for me, because I just kind of felt like that was definitely me sort of like almost like discarding the, you know, that working classness, because I just knew once I got there. But it was interesting because before I went to art school, I spent a lot of time in the arts before I went to art school, and it didn't feel it's changed a lot, I think, art. And me and my friends were actually discussing it as well, that, you know, like it has changed a lot in the last few years, I think, art, and in terms of like how the art world operates. And I think it's interesting because working classness has become a big sort of it's become quite tokenistic within the art world, I think. But at the same time, if you are actually working class, like as a working class Glaswegian, I don't get any opportunity. Like everything I apply for, I don't get. And I'm quite open that I am a working class Glaswegian in my, you know, bios and stuff. And maybe things are oversubscribed, that's fine, you know, like loads of people are applying for stuff. But it's like, there's a few things that I've seen and I'm thinking, those are like you should be given opportunities to, you know, there are things that are based in Glasgow, and I see it's like artists from XYZ place, and I'm like, but there's no Glaswegian artists in there. And that for me feels like, and the project, in fact I'm not actually going to mention the project because people know what it is, but you know, it was a project based about Glasgow, and I'm like, but you have no experiences from people who were even born in Glasgow, which is fine because everyone can experience it in different ways, but you need to have that. You need to have that experience too. It
shows that there's a hierarchy between local and tourist, and we find that so much with placemaking as a subject, especially within socially engaged art. Placemaking is a dirty word in my mouth. If anyone says it, I try to wash their mouth out with soap. And it's like it's creating an environment for other people to come in to enjoy. It's not necessarily including the perspectives or opinions of the people who grow up there, who are born there, who contribute the most to those environments, because it's all about an economic inclusion of people from other places. Completely. So making it international or making it national or anything else.
And that's obviously not to say, like, I, you know, want to make it clear that I'm not being like, well, you know, Scottish opportunities should be for Scottish people. Like, I'm not meaning it like that, but it's just like, as you say, it's that kind of, there's that disparateness between, you know, having the actual opinions and work and whatever else it might be of the people who've actually grown up in that place. But to a certain extent in Glasgow, I feel a little bit pushed out. You know, being from Glasgow, which is crazy. But or you know, it's just like, it's mad, but that's, you know, that's a little bit how I feel some of the time.
Your feelings are absolutely valid, and I think it's an important one. You don't have to feel bad about that. You can feel okay.
I don't want to be like, oh, woe is me, I don't get any opportunities. It might just be that my work's rubbish and nobody wants me, but I'm always like, it's because I'm Glaswegian.
I'm like, well, the reason why I'm not successful because I'm working class. It's because I'm poor, isn't it? Like I'm fully in there. I guess I used to really bother me quite a lot, especially because I'm from up north, and we have very little funded opportunities up there, so it was highly competitive. And whenever an opportunity came up, all the artists in the area would go for it, all 10 of us, and like we would all go for that opportunity, and it would always be given to someone from out with. And that was a really frustrating thing, because it's like, and even to the point where really very well-known successful artists who lived in the area were getting shunted down in favour of folk who didn't have the same experience or same background or same skill set, which, like, their experience was huge, and they're internationally known artists, but they were pushed down in favour of parachuting someone else in. Like, why is that person's perspective any less relevant than the other person's? Than the person from the localised community. In fact, if it's a community engaged project or a socially engaged project regarding a locality, surely someone from the area would be better suited to be able to execute that thing. That's not betterness coming from me at all.
No, I think I feel a bit the same sometimes about stuff in Glasgow, but obviously Glasgow is such a hub for loads of people coming from everywhere else, and that's what makes Glasgow great. But also it's quite hard if you are from there and you feel like you're being bypassed for a lot of stuff, especially if you add working classness to that mix, and you just feel like, you know, you feel like you're being passed by because you're from the city, but also because of maybe your education, your background, who your parents are, who your parents know, who your parents don't know. You know, and like, my parents don't know anyone. My parents aren't artists. My parents have nothing to do with art. Like, they're not interested, like, but it's, you know, it's nothing to do with them. That's not their world. So I don't have any connections, you know, and I sometimes think it is a lot about, certainly when I went to art school, I discovered that it really was about sort of connections and, you know, like where you came from. And
nepotism is a real thing.
Yeah.
And art world is extremely a networked opportunity environment. And it is very frustrating, like, because even now with this show, and I don't feel actually any shame about it, but everyone who I'm including to contribute to this, except for Alex, he was an outsider, is also people I know. And that's on purpose. That's because, well, that nepotism exists on the other places, and people who are gatekeeping these opportunities. And I'm at this position of power right now, so who am I going to do? I'm going to do the exact same thing. I don't feel any shame about it. In fact, 'cause I know that I'm giving opportunities to people who are deserved of it. And that's highly important to me. And also, if that's going to be if that's the way they're going to play it,
why should we not do the same? But I think as well that sort of that attitude as well is kind of like, for me anyway, personally, comes from growing up in a working class background, because in growing up with like my gran and stuff, she would constantly be helping neighbours. Like, she was a home help when she was employed, before I came along, but you know, she was a home help, going around to people's houses, helping them with getting dressed, getting their food, whatever, you know. But like, she was always doing stuff for her neighbours. Like, she was always doing favours for people, and she was, you know, bringing other people up if they didn't have something. She would, you know, go, if she could get it, she would give it to them, you know. And I think like there is that attitude can be used for good in a way, you know, as opposed to it just being like, well, it's a circle of your friends who are already got 25 other opportunities, but you're just going to give them another one on top of that. You know, like, there is ways that you can use that nepotism in inverted commas, but it for good. And as I said, like, definitely that comes from, you know, like, and I think that's why I find it hard in the art world as well, applying for things and stuff, is because like sometimes people will approach you with stuff and go, you should apply for this. So then in my brain I'm like, oh, that means that this person's probably going to like put in a good word for me, and then I don't get it and I'm like, oh but the person, you know, so because like where I've came from, that's very much like, you know, like if someone said, oh, you should go in for this, like when my granddad was telling me about his, like, he got a job, but like his dad was the gaffer, the boss, but you know, like he got him a job, and like that's just how the world worked for where I came from, was like people would give you that wee step up to get to where you needed to go. And right now I'm stuck in that, like, no one is giving me that step up, and I'm trying, but I'm not getting that step, and I find that difficult to digest, because I'm used to coming from a place where you do what you can for each other, and I don't necessarily feel like that's reflected in the art world. But then again, I think I'm becoming a bit bitter about the art world.
Oh no, join that bitter club.
But you know, it's like,
it's also a thing that I feel like holds us back from getting good opportunities within like the institutions and establishments that are already up that hierarchy, rather than like ARIs, which do strive, a lot of them strive, not all of them will strive to it, but a lot of ARIs were striving for like inclusiveness in all the kind of marginalised communities. But I think that a lot of the time when these opportunities are given to people who are not working class, is because subconsciously or consciously, I can't tell which one, the gatekeepers in that arena know that the audience is not going to necessarily appreciate a working class mindset. And so knowing the audience is going to be of a higher class, then like, well, what's the point in us putting on working class artists who are making work for working class people, because working class people don't come into it.
Well, this is it. And I mean, back to earlier on, I'm like, my mum and dad's, you know, they would take me to Kelvin Grove on a Saturday or something, but like that was kind of as far as it would, you know, as they sort of delved into the art world. So like people like my mum and dad who are completely working class, I say that like I'm not, I need to get used to being like, I am still working class. You know, they wouldn't really go to, because they would probably be working, or that would be their one day off a week, and they would be going to the shopping, or they would be taking me to, I don't know, do something or other, do you know, or like they'd be like, my mum used to take her mum shopping every single Saturday, so like they had other things to do, so like those things aren't necessarily like high up on the list of priorities of working class people. So I definitely think, just because of the life, not because we're not into art, but because of the lifestyles that we have. You know, I'm cautious to be like, I don't want to say that working class people aren't into art, because that's completely not the case, but it's just our lifestyles don't often dictate a lot of free time.
Working class people consume art differently. It's not necessarily through footfall and galleries, and it's not necessarily through engaging with socially engaged art projects, unless it's specific to the area. Like my dad loves art. He loves art, to the point where, like, I ripped out a page of Guernica from a library book that was framed up on the wall. You know, like that. My dad, and now he's retired. He worked a really intense job, which gave him a good whack of danger money. So then now he was able to afford art. Yeah. But the artwork that's mostly up on his walls is from me, from my ex-husband, from his other son-in-law. Like, it's all from people who he knows. Yeah. He's also got some favourite artists who's now collected over the years. But like, there was always some sort of form of art on the walls, but it was never bought works. Yeah. And whenever we did go to art galleries or anything, it was a special, exciting treat. Yeah. And I've got really fond memories of when because I was born in Dumbarton and my dad's from Dumbarton. Yeah. So going to Glasgow and going to see amazing art shows there as a very, very small child. And they were always extremely exciting moments for me. It was like going to a theme park. Yeah. So there was a consumption of art, but it was never in the same kind of way of going like, well, we need to go and see the new show that's opened up, and we need to go to this opening right now, and we need to go and do this. We need to keep in touch with all the art community. It's like, well, that was something that's never accessible to him, and he always felt excluded from art. Yeah. But he loves it so much. So obviously it was exciting for him to get an artist's daughter. Yeah. Even though as soon as I told him I was going to art school, he was like, what's the point in doing that? You can't get money out of that.
I know. I feel like my parents were both like, when I didn't get in the first or second time, they were like, are you trying again though? And I was like, yeah, because I'm going to get in. And they were like, but you don't just want to go do something else? And that wasn't them being like dismissive. That was them just being like, you know, like, we want you to just get on in life. We don't want you to be like holding yourself back constantly. But it was something for me that I needed to do. Now I'm kind of like, probably could have just like, I don't know, done. I want to be a dog.
Sparky?
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so strange. You should say that, because my friend's like, you should be an electrician.
I think it's a good idea. Yeah. I've said to all three of my kids, I've made it very clear, I want you all to go and get a trade.
Well, trades are the
Go and get a trade, and after that, do whatever bullshit degree you want to do. Do philosophy, do art, do drama, do whatever the hell you want that makes no sense, whatever. But first of all, get yourself a trade.
I know. I wish I'd done it. But I think as well, to go back to what you were saying earlier about how we consume art as working class people, I definitely think, again, harken back to, and I spend a lot of time. I think I spend a lot of time in the past in my artwork and in my personal life. You know, like, I spend a lot of time in the past and a lot of time thinking about things that happened when I was a child, or childhood memories, or I love going, like, we went holidays to St Andrews as a kid, and so, like, you know, even today I saw the bus going to St Andrews and I was like, oh God, I just want to jump on the bus and go to St Andrews, because it's just like, it holds so much for me. But I think, as you say, but the way about consuming art is like that. This was my first ways of consuming art, was seeing these plates on my grand's wall, particularly the plates because they were bigger. The thimbles were usually just like, you know, place names or whatever, but particularly with the plates, because, you know, it wasn't even like she had artwork in the plates, but just seeing drawings and like, you know, there's one there shaped like a fish, like, you know, like, that set my tiny mind off, and obviously a tangent that I've now ended up in here, where I make ceramics myself. But I think, those were like my ways of interacting with art a lot of the time when I was younger, were through things like this, through just like seeing stuff on plates, but not actually seeing stuff in galleries. See, I would go to Kelvin Grove every so often, but like, you know, it wasn't like a monthly occurrence or anything. It was just like whenever there was maybe like a big something on, do you know, we would go. But like, I think this is like, and I think that's kind of unique certainly obviously to me, but to a lot of working class people, and how they come about their first interactions with creative stuff or materials, or, do you know, like, all of this stuff's made of porcelain, and like I love porcelain now, and like I make these like Wally Dugs, which, you know, were on my gran had 2 Wally Dugs sitting on her fireplace, and it's just, I think that was like, it's just a different way, I think, isn't it, to like interact with art than necessarily you being fed it through a gallery space.
I think that's exactly it. And I think that there's a little thought that's popped up for me, and it may seem controversial, but that doesn't ever bother me. So if it makes you feel uncomfortable, like, just say I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to contribute to that. So there's been such a movement over the past maybe 10 years. It's probably been longer than that, but I've been very aware of it for about the past, 5-6 years, where it's like art as collector, and where people will go through that process of collecting items to display as a collection. And I've been making this connection in my head about it being appropriation of working class culture, as it being, because in the way that our grannies, our mums, lots of people that we know would collect items as a hobby of collection.
And which was also kind of like when I was doing some reading into it, was they were talking about how, like, you know, working class people would collect ceramics and knickknacks and bits and bobs, put them on display as a kind of like, not a show of wealth, but to show, you know, like where they had been, to show they'd been on far-flung holidays, or that someone they knew had been on far-flung holidays, or that they had money to collect these bits and bobs. And they had, you know, my gran had this, like, she had all these cabinets, these kind of dark wood cabinets that she had all displayed on, and you know, it would all be kind of like dusted down and all that stuff. So yeah, I think certainly, like, sorry, I totally interrupted you and I went off a tangent.
No, you're still on topic.
I'm on the tangent, but I've forgotten what the original topic was.
Artists as collectors, that appropriation.
Yes, completely. And like, yeah, I definitely feel like that definitely, and it's even as well with ceramics, you know, like ceramics has had such a resurgence, but ceramics for me has always been a working class thing, and I guess that's just because I grew up in a household with ceramic-y bits and bobs, and that household was working class, but and there obviously are very expensive ceramics, and ceramics are very old and they're not class defined necessarily. But for me, I think, yeah, the reason why I think I've came to ceramics is because it's very tactile and it's very touch orientated, and I can put myself into it, and you know, it's hand sized, and you can make it quite cheaply, or there are ways to make, you know, like especially slip casting, which is just obviously reproducing stuff, and you can do that relatively cheaply once you've got the mold, you know. But yeah, I would agree that certainly, like, there is maybe a sort of appropriation of something that I think that is, I mean, I'm sure upper class people obviously collect stuff too, but it just feels different, doesn't it?
Because it's this thing of say some like, believe you me when I say this, I am not saying this about your granny. I'm just, some people see obviously the collection of various of like limited edition plates, so it could be royal family plates, something like that, tacky.
Oh,
kitsch.
It's completely
That's it, right. And so that's a kind of almost, I find it to be a pejorative term on things that are very important to other people. To just kind of say, well, that's not of my class. And it's like, well, because my granny used to collect ceramic pigs. And so anytime we find a pig ornament, we buy her that pig ornament. She's collected a lot of pigs. I don't know why. And so, and that is kitsch, and it'd be labelled as tacky, but it meant so much to her. Owls. She was also collecting owls.
I'm trying to think. My granny, what was it that she liked to collect? I'm not going to remember right now, but she had a little. She had a fancy for. Do you know what it would have been? It would have been dogs, because we were a huge dog family, and she actually, and you know, when I was thinking about how I consumed working class art, I remember in the hallway of her house, which is that home, which is now the home my mum lives in, because whenever my gran passed away, my mum moved in there. But so that's also quite interesting, actually, to sort of like reconnect with that space as an adult. You know, that's a space from my childhood, and it has all of these sort of memories, all these kind of like, you know, again, working class memories. And actually one of the pictures I sent you is like a picture, it must have been at Christmas time, but it's just like we used to put the dining table in the living room, and we'd all like squeeze round it, you know, and then like we used to have the kids table whenever I was young, we had the kids table in the wee dinette bit that was off the kitchen or whatever, off the living room. But and I remember when you used to walk in, she had this massive, huge, I mean, I don't even know what size it was huge, picture of a collie and a puppy collie. And I think about it quite a lot now, and I'm like, that is just like, but I love dogs so much, it's the kind of thing I would probably have in my house, you know, but it was like in a big pretend gilt gold frame, and I just think about it and I'm like, it just makes so much sense that like I make the kind of artwork that I make and the things I'm interested in, just because like that was my first interactions. Like my dad had this huge big like tacky dog picture, you know, and like I still even have, she had this smaller one that was like a gilt frame with like a little girl in a kind of bed scenario, and there was a wee dog and a wee cat, and they were like begging for the toast she had or something, again like very working class vibes, you know, but like I've still got that portrait, and it's one of my like prized possessions, you know, because it belongs to my gran, but also because it connects, you know, like there's a lot of connections there for me with that. But yeah, just in terms of like how, again, thinking back to how like you consume art, and I'm just like, no wonder that I'm kind of this like weird dog crazy ceramic lady when I look at where I've came from. And even in these pictures, you know, like this, like literally that picture there, as I say, you can maybe pop it up, it's like there's a dog, there's ceramics, there's very much working class vibes going on in the background. The decor, working class.
Yeah.
Oh, there's also this one as well. The decor is just I mean, I don't know if you would necessarily call this working class decor, but it's something.
Yeah. No,
you know,
it's there.
like the pink curtains, the pink what would you call that? Oh, what do you call that around the window?
Trim of some
Yeah,
kind. I'm not
the
very
green
good.
velvet and the lace cushions and stuff.
And
I'm
the
just
blinds,
like,
the vertical blinds.
yeah, that
everything
just
there.
like screams working class to me, and I don't know why. Sometimes I find it hard to put my finger on it actually as to why these images, particularly, like, as I say, I work a lot with. You don't necessarily see the photos and the final artworks I make, or whatever, but a lot of photos. You know, I do work from a lot of imagery that was taken by family members or whatever, but I can't quite put my mind or the words to why I think that's working class. But for me, that even particularly that image just screams. I don't know why, but it really just does to me. You know?
There's something like there's a comforting banality about it, because it's recognizable to me as well, even though at the same time that's not what any of my granny's houses looked like. But I still recognize that very, very much so. There's touches of it, even like kind of the lighting. There's so many bits in those photos which do come across as being, and it's something to do with that everydayness. And not even just domesticity. It's like it's something that it's a familiar and repetitive image, because we've always, I think, a lot of us have been encouraged, especially our generation, us millennials, who have been told from a very young age that what we are striving for is better than what was before. And we were told that our future was going to be extremely bright. Oh, that's nice.
As we sit here in the middle of a global pandemic.
Exactly, and working in art world and being extremely underpaid, and we were promised this extremely bright future that we thought that we were going to ascend away from. And what we find is actually we're finding comfort and heldness in the banality that we had in our childhood.
100%. I hark back, and I think again that's a lot of my work is a step for me personally. You might not as a viewer see that it's a harking back for me, or just me thinking about the past a lot, but like everything I do almost personally and professionally is just like a long for these days, you know. And like that's quite sad, but also like it can be sad in turns and also like extremely, you know, comforting. But like I think a lot about, you know, and I mean I'm dying for a green velvet couch.
Oh, we'll find one for you.
You know, like that's just what I really want in my life is and I'm like, I just want this green velvet couch that my gran had. Like, why did we not hang on to this couch? Because this is exactly what I want in my house. And I'm like,
probably covered in dog fur.
It would be, it completely would be. Although my gran would have had to hoover out like 5 seconds after they left, you know, because she was like and that's the thing as well, like a lot of stuff. And I mean, this isn't even like, I think a lot of today when I was thinking about talking to you, a lot of it isn't even necessarily connected with art. It's connected with art because I'm an artist and I'm from a working class background, so that's how it connects. But a lot of it for me is just like how I go about my life, you know. Like I'm very I always think about my granny. I'm like, oh god, like I need to make sure the house is clean, and if the house is dirty, like people are gonna think, if they come around, they're gonna think, oh, I mean, not right now because no one comes round to your house, but in normal times, you know, people think you're a midden if your house is dirty, and you know, there's a lot of things that I just think that again just make me who I am, and that then reflects in my work and is inherent to me as a person, but is just like not even necessarily related to art, you know. It's just like comes from these, as you say, everyday kind of scenarios, you know, and these lived kind of experiences that you don't get. And I think I would go so far as to say that are not as much fun if you're not working class. Like if you're not all piled around a dinner table, if you've got plenty of room, if you're shouting at each other down a table, like I used to love just being like right up next to like my auntie and my cousins, and
having to go, if you
want to go under the table,
you have to go under the table to get out to the toilet. That's what you have to do, and all those bits. It's all it's all part of that beautiful thing of coziness.
Who I am.
But how it should be.
Well,
that's exactly how I'm just going to go into archaeology heritage stuff. But I think that's what our kind of formulation of what our communities should have been in the past. I am an anarchist, so I always believe in that. But you have like that, everyone should be chipping in and helping the kids. It shouldn't be an isolated experience raising children. And for grandparents and aunties to be helping raising a child it's still a thing that exists within communities. I mean, like in my estate up in Elgin, my kids have a very, very good relationship with the neighbours. We've got the Mammy Network, and we have to rely on each other because we were all single mums over a period of time, and we all needed to help each other out at the same time. So of course we're going to be there for each other,
completely.
And having that reliance on alternative networks, which is seen as some sort of level of non-success. I mean, actually, it's very successful.
But also, and I think like when you're talking about sort of like what was the word you just said? I've totally forgotten. What did you literally just say?
What did I just say?
Why do I keep forgetting?
We literally could rewind the tape and see.
But I keep forgetting?
Like
non-linear or like non sort of normative, relationships or ways. But like that, then I kind of also like that again connects for me with art in that like I am not, I feel like an outsider, or like I feel like. And also, like, I feel like the way I've lived my life is very different to the way my grandmother lived her life, the way my mum has lived her life, where it's like you go to school, you leave, you get a job, you work till you're retired, and then you get married, you have kids. Whereas I am in my 30s, I have just bought a flat, like literally last year.
Congratulations on that,
Thank you so much. And also, that's quite a source for me of... I kept that very quiet from a lot of people because I was really worried that I would come across as not working class. But that's bad because as a working class person, I should still be able to own a flat.
Yeah, you should.
It's not my fault that the market is like, the housing market's insane, but I felt quite a lot of guilt around that. Like, okay, I own my own home now, so I'm not working class, but like, it's a room and a kitchen, Like, it is a room and a kitchen, quite literally, but it's mine, and it means I'm not wasting money on rent anymore. But anyway, that's by the by. But so I feel like a lot of the ways that perhaps I live my life or have in comparison to where my mum would have been at 33 or my gran would have been at 33 is very different, and that's kind of like non-normative, and I'm trying to think where I'm thinking around this, like just like these non-normative ways of living. I think being an artist can be very like that, especially if you come from a working class background, because your family is like, but what is it you're actually doing? And you're like, it makes complete sense to you, but your parents are like, so you're still working in that gallery and you're still just doing this? And I'm like, yes, I'm still just making like the minimum wage an hour. My parents are like, they're fine with, I mean, as long as I'm happy, they don't care, but they're just a bit like, is that okay? And I'm like, well, I'm kind of down this road now, so...
I think as well, because for us kids born in the 80s, though, our parents definitely really, really wanted us to ascend the ladder.
Yeah.
And they had middle class aspirations for us.
Completely.
So then when we're like, well, actually, we've got the middle class aspiration, in fact, that we're working in the arts, which that was never a thought before, but just the style of how that arena works now, it just happens to be that we all have to live working class lifestyles because we are artists. It's just ridiculous.
I know. And that's not to say that my parents, I mean, again, like completely supportive, but I think as you say, my parents were just kind of very much like, right, I'm an only child, so I think they were like pouring everything into me. They were like, she's going to be, I don't know, a brain surgeon or something. And I was like, I like colouring in. And they were like, oh no, she's going to just be like doing whatever, like whatever job to like, so she can colour in on the side, But so I think they're just a bit like, if you're happy, we're happy. But also, like, I think, as you say, I think they kind of thought, right, well, she's probably going to go, well, I've not gone far, and I really need to stop putting myself down in these ways. But, I think they kind of thought, like, oh, she'll probably be, I don't know, in charge of the Tate in, like, 5 years after art school. And I'm like, it does not work like that.
No.
But as I say, they're completely super supportive. But I think just because of the way, like, my mum wanted to be a nursery nurse, but my gran and granddad couldn't afford to give her money to go, so she just had to go and get a job, and she's been doing that job for, well, she's changed jobs a few years ago, but she's been doing similar job for, what am I, 33, so probably like 40 years, and it's just like, and my dad's the same, like he left school and just went straight into work, and went back to college kind of like in his 30s to get a couple of like HNCs and whatever to develop stuff so he could work with kids and stuff like that. But it's just it's interesting, isn't it? And sometimes I do feel a bit like I've let them down, just because I'm like, I feel like I should be like really high flying, or at least have like a child or something, you know, just like give them something, a little bit of something, whereas I'm just like, no, just out here, you know, like just making ceramics. And
well, I don't know your parents personally, but I don't think that's because I don't think that they felt that you've let them down. I hope that's
no,
not
they
the
definitely
case.
don't. I know they'll kill me if they ever hear this. They'll be like, can't believe you've said that in public, because they definitely don't. My dad is like literally my biggest fan. He has Instagram, but just so he can see what I'm up to, and his bio is Hayley Jane Dawson's dad. That's his bio. So they are completely proud of me. But I'd say sometimes I just think, I wonder if they just wonder sometimes, like, I mean, had I not, and that's the thing as well, like, one of my parents was from a place called South, which is quite a small town, kind of like an overspill of you know, after they had all these like overspill towns, kind of Cumbernauld, all those kind of places, from Glasgow, and then my dad's from the south side of Glasgow, so I kind of got like, which is kind of like fairly city based, so I've got this kind of country and city sort of like meeting of minds. So I kind of always was a bit like, I never wanted to just be like, not that there's anything wrong with it, but for me personally, it wasn't the choice I wanted to make, was to just like leave school, get a job, get married to someone that I went to school with, and then just have kids and stay in the town I grew up in. That was just something that, because I'd always seen the outside, I'd always seen Glasgow because I used to go there to see my dad and stuff. So I think, I've forgotten where I was going with that. Why do I keep going off on tangents and forgetting where I'm going?
Because they're exciting, it's adventurous, it's an adventurous conversation.
Oh, I know, but I'm trying to think of what I was going to say. But anyway, I always kind of had that alternative way of looking at stuff that was kind of just like, well, I'm not just going to fall into the mould that my parents necessarily had or my grandparents had, but sometimes I'm like, might have been better if I just had. Probably would like have quite a nice house by now, and maybe I wouldn't even have to work because my husband would go to work. I mean,
as someone who did that first, you know, like I didn't go. I got pregnant when I was 17, and I had my eldest when I was 18, and then I got married when I was 20, and I did do the whole stay in the hometown and raise the kids and be a wee wifey, and realised very quickly that was not for me. That was not what I wanted to do. It was not satisfying, and I think that although there could have been a level of security there, which there was. I had a council house. It was a nice council house in a new build in a nice area. When we moved in, it was a nice area. It's no longer like that now. And it was just, there was an element of security, and there was an element of kind of predictability that was quite a safe thing. Yeah. But that wasn't what fed my soul. I recognised that, you know, because before I got pregnant, I was going to be an absolute rock star. I was going to be an internationally renowned musician, and being a wee wifey to someone was not going to actually fulfil that dream. Yeah,
I know. I say that, but I knew within me from a very young age that I was like, no. So the grass is always greener, though, isn't it? Like when you're in a room and kitchen in Cathcart in Glasgow, you're like, well, I could be living in a nice big new build house with my husband and my kids, but then that would not be. I would get there and I'd be like, oh, actually, I'll take the room and kitchen, thank you. Also, I think as well, like a lot of the way I speak, like a lot of these things is also very working class, and like I think, just even saying room and kitchen, like I don't know that that's a phrase that like a lot of people who are not working class would know necessarily, because people who weren't working class didn't live in room and kitchens.
That could be it. Yeah,
they had 2 rooms probably in a kitchen, whereas I literally have a room and a kitchen and the bathroom, I suppose, but it doesn't really count as a room, you know.
No, it's a cupboard for peeing.
Yeah, exactly. But then, as you say, the matriarchy, like kind of like, is my mum surprised that I'm a lesbian? Because I grew up in a very woman-dominated, you know, household. Like I was with my granny every day. Like I've got one uncle, but the rest of my mum's relatives are my aunties. Then I grew up with my mum. My dad was on the scene, but I didn't live with him. So like, you know, I saw him kind of on the weekend, stayed with him 1 or 2 nights a week, or if, you know, every second weekend, whatever. And I just kind of grew up with women, and strong women at that, and very like, you know, very, I mean, to the point, like my granny was just, you know, she was quite formidable, you didn't want to really mess with her, you know, and I kind of grew up seeing that, and like seeing how the strong bonds that women had, and especially in sort of working class environments where you didn't have a lot and you really had to pull together, and you had to make the best of the little that you had, and I'm like, this is great. And then I kind of just see the men wandering about, like, no having to take on a lot of that responsibility. So I'm like, is it really a shock that then when I grew up I would associate love and happiness with women as opposed to men?
Yeah.
But again, that's just my personal experience, and that might not be the reason why I'm a lesbian. I have no idea. I think boobs are great, so
Boobs are great.
So that's probably why I'm a lesbian a lot of the time. But for the more serious parts, then like that's just something that like now I can connect as seems like a logical trajectory. That I grew up surrounded by strong women and associated them as being like things I could rely on and things that were the best and things that were there for me and supported me and loved me. So therefore, when I grew up, obviously I would want to replicate that. Yeah. And it takes them a while. They get there, I think.
I've never seen one get there.
My dad, but he's 57.
Maybe it's like after they turn 50, they suddenly
totally
get it.
Is, yeah. Like
I'm hoping so.
Yeah, it really took him a long time. He was not there and he's there now, and I'm like, yeah, it's just like it takes them a long time, and I don't want to wait till that. I don't want to wait that long,
No, God, maybe that's why. No, that is definitely not why we have older men going out with younger women.
Oh,
I was about to say maybe that's why we've got a lot of older men with younger women. No, that is not why. We know that's not why. That is not it. I was about to just completely whitewash misogyny.
We're like, get that. Oh, it makes so much sense now. But
they just have the mental maturity of an 18-year-old girl.
Great, they finally caught up. Yeah. But so again, I don't know like explicitly. I couldn't say well like the connection between being a lesbian and being working class is X. But I just know that I sit at that intersection.
Yeah.
And like it seems like it is an intersection though. Do you know, like because it's my intersection. Because it's my personal experience. Yeah. It might not be anybody else. Well, it will be other people in this world's experience, but as I say, I find it hard to sometimes actually pin down why I feel the way that I feel, especially a lot with my work as well. Like I feel things and I'm like, but I don't know why. Which when you go to art school, they want to know everything. They want to know why you feel these things. I'm like, I just do. Like, stop asking me.
Stop getting me to rationalise things that are feelings.
Yeah, like I just feel stuff. Like, do I need to have a reasoning behind every feeling, or can I just feel it? Is that okay? Like,
exactly right.
So
like, I'm really excited for you to find this out and to be able to, if you wanted to. I mean, if you're wanting to explore it, and if that's in part in your journeys like that, it's going to be really interesting to see where you go with it. And I'm excited to hear it when it comes to you.
Hopefully it will. It's on the way, so here's hoping.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to me. It was an absolutely beautiful conversation, and I'm really excited to see where all of it goes.
Thank you. Thanks.